Hi, you're listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction. We're your hosts, Amber and Dan.
Find any trigger warnings in our episode notes. We're happy you're joining us and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about a book by Shirley Jackson called Neighborhood Vignettes.
This is her debut novel.
Yeah. You're supposed to laugh because that was really funny.
Oh, what a clever, witty statement there, my love.
That's more like it.
That's what the title should have been. But instead it was...
The Road Through the Wall, Shirley Jackson's debut novel published in 1948. Maybe you even know the exact date since you're such a fangirl.
Way to put me on the spot. I actually don't know.
Oh, you have all these extensive notes except for the publication date. Whatever. Came out in 1948. Basically, we're reading this book because Amber's too scared to talk about We've Always Lived in the Castle or whatever the other one is.
The Haunting of Hill House?
The Haunting of Hill House.
No, I don't want to talk about The Haunting of Hill House. Everyone talks about that book.
Yeah, they're too precious to her.
Okay, to be fair, we will someday talk about We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I was kind of hoping to wait to see if my birthday falls on a publication date.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Because then I'd want to do it then. But we'll see. I have to look at the calendar. If it doesn't, then in like the next couple of years, then we'll just have to do it.
Also, I feel like, I mean, there's definitely got to be a lot of discussion about We Have Always Lived in the Castle, but I feel like The Haunting of Hill House is the more well-known of those two.
It became her most famous, yes, for sure. And I think in part because of the films.
I think with this book, the lottery pairs up really well, by the way.
She actually published The Lottery right after this.
And for those of you who don't know, The Lottery is what made her like nationally famous, right? I think she
but how about we stop talking about what I'm about to talk about before I talk about it?
Wait, we should talk about the book we read instead of the book that comes after the book we read?
Well, actually, The Lottery, well, technically, yes, it was a book, but it is a short story. But yes, it's in my little spiel about her as the author.
Spiel away.
So let's backtrack a bit and let's get a little background on Shirley Jackson. So she was born in San Francisco and grew up in Burlingame, which is on the peninsula just south of the city. She was in a pretty wealthy family, which she ends up mocking, in a sense, with this book. Her senior year of high school, her family moved to Rochester, New York. She had to leave all her friends, start afresh as a senior in high school, which must have really sucked, and started college at the University of Rochester. After 1 year, she hated it. She went on hiatus and ended up transferring to Syracuse University. She helped found a literary magazine where she ended up working with her future husband, Stanley Edgar Hyman, and he would become a literary critic and did a lot of book reviews for The New Yorker, among other things. He was a teacher as well and such. Her first published story is entitled Janice, which I thought was really funny.
Really?
Yes, because one of my best friends' name is Janice, and so I had to tell her. I actually can read it. I have it. It's one page. Do you want me to read it?
Oh, yeah, go for it. Okay. A little sneaky treat.
Yeah, a little sneaky treat. First, to me on the phone in half-amused melancholy, guess I'm not going back to school. Why not, Jan? Oh, my mother. She says we can't afford it. How can I reproduce the uncaring inflections of Janice's voice, saying conversationally that what she wanted she could not have? So I guess I'm not going back. I'm so sorry, Jan. But then, struck by another thought, you know what? What? Darn near killed myself this afternoon. Jan, how? Almost whimsical, indifferent. Locked myself in the garage and turned on the car motor. But why? I don't know, 'cause I couldn't go back, I suppose. What happened? Oh, the fellow that was cutting our lawn heard the motor and came and got me. I was pretty near out. But that's terrible, Jan. Whatever possessed... Oh, well, say, changing again, going to Sally's tonight? And later, that night at Sally's, where Janice was not the center of the group, but sat talking to me and Bob. Nearly killed myself this afternoon, Bob. What? Lightly. Nearly killed myself. Locked myself in the garage with a car motor running. But why, Jan? I guess because they wouldn't let me go back to school. Oh, I'm sorry about that, Jan. But what about this afternoon? What did you do? Man cutting the grass got me out. Sally came over. What's this, Jan? Oh, I'm not going back to school. Myself cutting in. How did it feel to be dying, Jan? Laughing. Gee, funny, all black. Then to Sally's incredulous stare. Nearly killed myself this afternoon, Sally. That's the story.
Just a little something to talk about. Here's what I did with my day.
Shirley Jackson, in a nutshell, her first published story while she was in university.
Very like demure, polite conversation about like horrific
a very
topics.
serious topic. Yeah. Yeah. So I sent that to Janice and I'm like, look, this was her first publication. She's like, oh my God, that is funny, but also horrific. But anyway, so another funny connection, again, with Janice, my friend. Eventually, Shirley Jackson and her husband, Stanley, moved to Bennington, Vermont. And lo and behold, my friend Janice is from Vermont. So we had a good chuckle about all the odd connections, per usual for me. Anyway, so Shirley had 4 children. She kept house, and she became the material breadwinner for the family with her writing. Although Stanley still controlled all of their finances and was consistently unfaithful to Jackson's distress. He was, ever since they first met, he was a womanizer and pretty much insisted on an open marriage, whether she liked it or not, which probably helped with her writing. And
I hope it pleased her that she was making more money.
It did. Yeah. So I'm listening to a biography about her, and there are some quotes about her, like saying, well, he can't complain now that I'm just sitting around writing letters to people when I'm making money while doing it. It's pretty good. Her health deteriorated when she was, I would consider, rather young. She was a heavy smoker, which led to chronic asthma. She had heart problems and severe anxiety. She's often known for suffering from agoraphobia, which in a very general sense is like the fear of something bad happening, so you don't go out of your house. And some of her anxiety may have been heightened by her on and off use of amphetamine, which was prescribed to her for weight control. She was not a skinny person, and this affected her throughout her life. So this and the fact that she was also on barbiturates may have helped in her declining health, which is sad. Both of these were prescribed by doctors and was totally normal back then. It reminds me of the...
the Wellness Center and We Sold Our Souls?
Yes.
Is that what you're going to say?
Actually, no, I was thinking of Mother's Little Helper by the Rolling Stones. But yeah, that too, the Wellness Center. It's like, it's fine. Everything's fine. Just take these drugs. Her final novel that was published was actually We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which has been made very clear for many times. It's my favorite book of all time. That was published in 1962, and she died 3 years later at the age of 48 years old.
Ouch.
Yeah, very young. She also loved cats. She had hordes of black cats roaming around her house.
I wonder if she got the idea from Hemingway. Oh, I mean, she probably just
cats?
Just because he famously had that like spot in Florida that has like a bunch of, isn't it Florida?
Aren't they contemporaries?
Doesn't he have a house?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't there like a Florida house where he like adopted a bunch of wild cats?
I mean, I don't know if hers were wild. They were all black cats specifically. So I don't know if I don't know those that.
Also, I think a cat person
I don't know the details about her
just
cat
acquires cats.
Yes.
I doubt she like read, oh, Hemingway has cats. I'll have cats too.
Yeah. She also had a dog, but she had lots of cats. So I'm like, yeah, get it, girl. Her and her husband also amassed an impressive library. Can you guess how many books they had in their library?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How does our library compare to it?
It's laughable.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Remember,
not to imply we have like a huge, extensive library, but we do have a cool library. And
I know for a fact we have over 300 books.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about
also,
right.
keep this in mind. Her husband was a prolific book critic, so they would be sent books, but also they were collectors. So
I'm going to say 1,500 books.
They had over 25,000 books.
Oh my God, that's too many. That's too many books.
They were like covering all the walls and stacks. Think of like a one of those old used bookshops. I think it was kind of like that.
Wow.
At one point, there was a bad flood at one of their homes, and it destroyed everything in their garage, and like hundreds of books were ruined.
Ugh.
Also, Stanley was being investigated by the FBI for, what was it? The un-American
Red
activities.
Scare?
Yeah. Because while they were moving, one of the boxes broke, and in that box, it just happened to be a lot of like Marxist writing and communist stuff.
He's like, come on, guys, we have like 25,000 bucks.
Yeah, the one box you had to break was the one with the Communist Manifesto.
That'd actually be interesting to look into, just like how the Red Scare affected book publishing in general, because I'm sure it affected it quite strongly.
I know it was aimed more towards Hollywood, but yes, it definitely affected authors as well. Yeah, so 25,000 books. I read that. I'm like, wait, did I read that correctly?
That's insane.
It's not 2,500, it's 25,000. So within her lifetime, Shirley Jackson won numerous awards, including the O. Henry Prize stories in 1949 for The Lottery. She won multiple Best American Short Stories. She won the New York Times Book Review's Best Fiction multiple times. She was also nominated for the National Book Award for The Haunting of Hill House, and We Have Always Lived in the Castle was included in Times Magazine 10 Best Novels of the Year, which was 1962. And that was, in her lifetime. Currently, I'm reading a biography about Jackson, and sadly, I have not been able to finish it, but I have gotten past the book we're reading. And that's where I got a lot of this information as well.
What's your, like, off the top of your head, what's like a fun fact, if you can think of one from the book?
Well, the cats, the books.
Okay. Yeah.
The books
I guess
getting
you
destroyed.
have been giving us fun facts the whole time.
The Red Scare thing. The fact that she grew up in the Bay Area was really exciting for me. At one point, they mentioned Black Hawk, but they mentioned it as someone's name. And I'm not from Black Hawk, but it's close to where I grew up from. But it was really fun hearing all about the Bay Area in the 40s. And I'm like, man, I need to read a history of the Bay Area in that time period. So that's probably what I'm going to do. And then it's a lot about her writing and she was a messy housekeeper. I mean, she had 4 kids and she was writing and cleaning and doing all that stuff. And a lot of people are like, she wasn't the best at cleaning, but it's fine. Anyway, moving on. So this is really cool. I just found this out the other day. So since at least 2015, Jackson's adopted home of North Bennington has honored her legacy by celebrating Shirley Jackson Day. And it usually falls on June 27th, which is the day that the lottery took place. And this year, it's going to be on June 22nd, which is it's like a week away, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
She also has, named after her, the Shirley Jackson Award, which started in 2007. Fun connecting fact here, John Langan, who wrote The Fisherman, which we have read this season, was one of the original jurors and founders of the award and is now on the advisory board. I wanted to list off books that have won the award that are connected to books that we have read for the podcast. In 2008, Yoko Ogawa won the Collection Award for a different collection than what we read, The Diving Pool. In 2009 and in 2015, Stephen King won the novelette and single author collections, respectively, for Mortality and then The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. In 2019, Brian Evenson won the single author collection for, lo and behold, The Song for the Unraveling of the World, which is the book that we read. We've mentioned this before in our last podcast. Stephen Graham Jones has won 3. So he has won more than Stephen King. Just wanted to give him a little shout out for that. It's pretty impressive. In 2020, he won 2. And in 2020, he won 1. So in 2020, he won the best novel and best novella. The novel was For the Only Good Indians, which we read. And the novella was Night of the Mannequins, which I suggest you read. And then in 2021, the novel was My Heart is a Chainsaw, which is the beginning of his Indian Lake trilogy, also a very good book. And last but not least, in 2022, Sophie White won or tied the win for Best Novel for Where I End, which we also read. So 3 books that we have read have won Shirley Jackson Awards, which is really cool.
Yeah, Shirley Jackson and the Bram Stoker Awards are definitely the 2 awards I read about the most in my research for our podcast.
And the Shirley Jackson Awards have just been announced for...
Yeah, I saw that.
The nominations have just been announced. And the Bram Stoker Awards are actually this coming weekend. I'm part of the Horror Writers Association. I was really tempted to go to the Stoker Con, is what the con is called this year, but it's in Stamford, Connecticut, and unfortunately that is a little too much of an ask for me. I would have had to fly cross country, made my way to Connecticut, and it didn't seem easy, and it was going to be really expensive. And last year it was in San Diego, so I'm hoping next year it'll be at least somewhere closer to a major airport, but I think they'll announce it this weekend.
By next year, you could be like, yeah, I'm deep into season 2 of my podcast.
Yeah, and
so that's cool.
You guys are actually going to benefit from the StokerCon because there is a panel that I'm going to watch that is about doing podcasts in horror. So we'll just get even better at this.
Yeah. They'll probably say, like, here are the top 5 things you should never do in a podcast. We'll be like, oh, fuck, shit, oh, crap, damn it.
We do every single one of those. Huzzah! So anyway, moving on to the actual book. Thank you for giving me my space to have a little, what do you call it? Fandom?
Oh, like, I don't know, something geeking out?
Geeking, yeah. Yeah, thanks for letting me geek out a bit.
So here's how I do the summaries a lot of the time, including this one. And I don't know if it's going to land me in jail or not. So Amber just copy and pasted like the Goodreads summary. And sometimes it'll be the wiki summary or something like that. And then I'll just like fix it up a little bit because there's usually...
Plagiarism.
Yeah. So I don't know. Here's my plagiarized summary. Everyone knows the residents of Pepper Street are nice people, especially the residents themselves. Among the self-satisfied group are Mrs. Miriam, the sanctimonious shrew who is turning her husband into a non-entity and her daughter into a bigoted spinster. Mr. Roberts, who finds relief from the street's unending propriety and shoddy side street amours. And Miss Fielding, who considers it more important to boil an egg properly than to save a disturbed girl from destruction. And now Pepper Street is being opened up to the wider world through a little hole in the wall, piercing the shell of the neighborhood's complacency and forcing them to confront their own ugliness.
I think they're tearing down the wall, though. It's not just a little hole.
Yeah, it's not a little hole. I added that part in the end. The bad parts of the summary are my parts. Yeah,
I mean, it's not bad. It's clever, yeah. But it's a little inaccurate.
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess if you're looking at it in a metaphoric sense.
That's what I was thinking.
Also, Mr. Roberts is a drunk.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts just like goes around.
I'm too drunk to search for Carolyn.
Also, the original summary made an assumption about something that happened at the end.
Well, the original summary on Goodreads.
Yes.
So, yes, it does. It's weird because it gives away the ending and it also gives it away incorrectly, which I have actually never seen before. I guess because it's a classic, they feel they can get away with that. I don't know. Or someone just wrote it and they never changed it because this isn't her most popular novel.
I mean, the book kind of like makes you think that that's it, but
I think that's the point, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, but we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah, I should say for this book, we're probably going to go full spoiler, yeah? I mean, this has been out since 1948. It's
literally on Goodreads, so...
And honestly, like, you read this, and you're going to be more entertained. I should, full disclosure, I enjoyed reading this book. Jackson is an awesome writer.
Is this as far from horror as you want to go?
This is absolutely as far from horror as I want to go. The most horrifying thing about...
We found our limits, folks.
Yeah. For Amber, the limit was philosophy. For me, the limit is sardonic smiles in living rooms.
Sardonic smiles, yes. Fair. That is fair. I remembered the ending happening. I didn't think it happened quite so late, and I thought there was more intrigue in this. I mean, there is a lot, but I don't remember it being so subtle. I love that it's subtle. I love rereading it. I still really like this book, But yeah, I definitely can understand why it would not be your favorite by her. And part of it too, debut novel, you're kind of figuring out your thing.
Well, let's give a little. Let's go into a little bit of the book, and then we can start talking about our thoughts on it.
I just want to say one more thing about it. It is loosely based on her childhood in Burlingame, and she said in an interview, I believe is an interview or a letter or something like that, that like your first novel is always like to spite your parents. So there is that added element to this.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's set the scene of the neighborhood, the time this book was published. So, because a lot of this is satire, right? Not to say it's like straight satire. Jackson is very talented in like being subtle and natural in her satire, but still, it's satirizing, right? Yes. So, let's kind of set up the world of the book, the cast, and the real world it released into, because that was 1948. I
made a map of the street. I wouldn't say
check it out on our Instagram. You should post it or not. No,
I'll try to make it a little better.
Or dumb.
I can't say it's completely accurate, but it helped my brain because she just like lists the Desmonds live next to Mrs. Mag. So okay, I will make this a little prettier, and I will post this online. They pretty much all live along one street, Pepper Street, and at the end of that street is Cortez Road, and on the other side of Cortez Road is a wall. So they're kind of insulated. They have vacant lots on the other side of Pepper Street. There are gates on one side that don't actually close. They just have those cement square blocks that indicate a gate, and then apartments on the other side of that. So on the back side of one row of the houses. And that's like the outside world. So they're a little insular.
This is very much like side street USA kind of vibe. Yeah.
Yes. And there are a lot of children. I started writing down I think I got all the children's names down. So 17 children within like 6 or 7 houses. I think on average, everyone had at least 2 children. So lots of kids running around.
Yeah. And I mean, at this time period in American development, coming right out of World War II, it's like the boom in copy paste suburban housing development, right?
Yes.
And just generally like an economic boom following the war.
Yes. So all these children are technically baby boomers.
Yeah. And so like at that time, like one of the effects of the big boom in housing development was neighborhoods that had people of a similar income level, similar race, similar, just like people of very similar cultures were moving into neighborhoods together. And that created
the suburbs.
That created the suburbs, and that also created hegemony in culture because...
Yes. The suburbs were a way to escape the urban life, the icky, dirty cities. And once people had access to cars and such, the wealthy people or wealthier middle-class people were allowed and able to leave the cities and create these little exclusive neighborhoods, excluding minorities most specifically.
And a couple things too, like, so while women did work in the factories a lot during World War II, while the men were off fighting, it's kind of like there was definitely
the riveter.
Yeah, there's definitely like a backlash, right? When the men came back and they're like, okay, now get back in the kitchen. And this is like during this time period, that's a huge part of the late 40s, early 50s American suburban life is like the wife happily stays at home and cooks and takes care of the kids, and is her entire like purpose in life is to give peace of mind to her husband. So it was a rockin' time, guys.
Oh yeah. And I love how you made sure to say that the women were happily doing this.
Oh yeah. Well, how could you not love to support your husband, your children, and make all the meals and do all the cleaning and not be a person, but a robot?
Oh, I actually can pull up my first quote of the book.
I should actually say, while you're looking for that, I just saw a really stupid advertisement on social media, but it was a picture from the 50s of a wife cooking at the stove, and then her husband and two children are behind her, kind of like embracing her as she's cooking, and she's smiling. And then the post was like, what kind of propaganda do you have to listen to think this is a bad idea? So basically saying like, look how happy this family is. This is how it was. So we're still dealing with the kind of stuff that Jackson is dealing with here.
Yes, and she just does it so well. So here's my first quote. This is Mrs. Roberts talking. Tonight, more than ever before, she felt that her husband was imposing on her, living happily far away in his distant, softly colored world, while his wife labored and sometimes cried unnoticed. Brutal, subtly brutal. Like, he doesn't even notice how miserable I am, and he doesn't care. And that is so much of this book, because the 90% of this book is from the perspective of women, the women and children. And that is a staple with Jackson. She always wrote from the perspective of women and children. And she embodies that really well in this. I'm wondering if that's partly why it's so confusing to you. There's so many people. I didn't have as hard of a time keeping them in order.
I had a hard time. This is an ensemble cast.
There's a lot of like women kvetching in the kitchen and stuff. And like that is sort of my realm. That's the woman's realm, right?
Yeah, this is definitely like violence in the home, if you've heard of that concept of, like the violence we commit to each other at the dinner table.
Yes, and the women definitely uphold the standards of the patriarchy that is their downfall, which has been a constant issue with women and patriarchy, is a lot of women feed into it and propagate these ideas. It's sad.
And so like, we get this hole in the wall, right? And that really works well for this time in American history too, because following World War II, there was, because of the economic boom that came out, and you had a lot more diversity, and you had people, like black soldiers returning from the war who were like, okay, well, I just fought for this country's freedom.
I was treated fairly in France.
I don't know how often they were treated fairly, but
by the French, yes, definitely much more equally. And the American like military was like, please stop treating them so well. They're gonna come home and like be pissed.
Yeah, so you start to see, some diversity pouring out even into the suburbs, right? And we have a character in the book that we might get to later, who's just described as a Chinaman who like talks to some of the kids in the neighborhood, because there's a little bit of diversity coming out, at least if not directly in the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a Jewish family.
There is a Jewish family,
Look at
right?
But diversity.
But they're still white, right? I mean,
yes.
That would be different at that time period than a black family moving in. That would have caused like a little panic.
Yes. But they're still ostracized.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually that does bring up another Shirley Jackson fact. Her husband Stanley was Jewish, so she was in a interreligious marriage.
Were either of them very religious, like practicing religious, or?
No, he was actually, I think, an atheist, but he was raised Jewish, and he was, culturally Jewish, and that was all that mattered back then. Obviously, even if you converted, you were still considered Jewish. But yeah, so sorry, that was just a side note that she did have experience about like the Jewish divide. So two of the girls, Harriet and Virginia, run into this gentleman on the sidewalk. Virginia literally running into him and saying that she dropped her nickel, getting all upset. And the guy's like, oh, I'll help you find it. And she's like, no, no, no. And then they realize he's Chinese, and then they're like, oh, never mind, like we have to leave right now. And he ends up inviting them up for tea in his apartment, and Virginia is like, yeah, let's go. It's very scandalous that they're even talking to this Chinese man. God forbid go back and meet with him again. And that scene's actually really weird, because there's definitely the racist, which is blatantly it's not even an undertone. It's just a very racist interaction. But then there's this like creepy sexual undertone, like these young girls who are not even, I think they're like 14, 15 years old, like going and meeting this very clearly adult man alone in an apartment. I don't know. There's just so many layers to this onion.
I mean, Jackson excels in layers of like
Creepiness.
awkwardness and creepiness within normal everyday conversations for sure. You get other examples of this idea of like, things are coming from the outside that are going to change the little community and thought processes that we've created on our little side street, right? Because even in the opening of the book, we have two characters, Mrs. Miriam and her daughter Harriet, who are pretty important here. And
I've read that Harriet can even be considered the main character of the book.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah.
But essentially, Harriet's mom found her diaries and stuff, and like
searched them out. She
Yes.
didn't find them.
Right, yeah, looked for them and read through them. And then ends up like taking her by the fireplace and is like, "We're burning your journals, you dirty girl." Apparently it's like a whole scandal too. Like they've girls in the neighborhood have been writing dirty letters to the boys. And so, right there, you already get the idea of like, you can't be thinking these dirty thoughts. And what's funny is I don't think they ever say what was written, and different characters like the dads are like, "Go get him, Roger," or whoever they're talking to, like, "Oh, your son is receiving dirty letters," and the father's like, "Yeah,"
smacks him on the back. "Good job, son."
Attaboy. While the
Go
the
get
moms
those
are
underage
like,
girls.
and I think there was this is how bad I am at the book. I just couldn't keep track of this number of characters. But I think another one of the moms is even like, it's not that big of a deal, while others are like, this is very scandalous and terrible.
I think that's Miss Ransom Jones. She seems to be the most level-headed of all the women.
But her sister's a bitch.
Well, her sister, I think, is also sleeping with her husband.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. They have this weird thing where
I'm going to tell Brad on you. And she's just so like, yeah.
So, there's just a lot of...
There's a lot. It's not horrific in the sense of like gore and stuff, but I don't know, like maybe Jackson has hit me deeper than I realized, sooner than I realized, because I never want to meet my neighbors. And
that's a really good point.
I think part of it might
lived in the
stem.
castle.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so true.
I think part of it might stem from reading Shirley Jackson so much. And to preface this, I grew up in the suburb. I've lived in cities, but we now live in the suburbs. Like that's just what I'm used to. That's where I want to live. They're quiet, there's space, and you're not so close to people, but yet you are, and people definitely will get in your business if you let them. And so there is that to this day, what is this, like 60, 70 years later, we're still, I still see this. Like we're literally in our neighborhood talking about a brick wall coming down and having to, this is different. We're not opening a new road, but we have to replace it. And it came up in our HOA meeting, like the conversation about, well, the wall keeps transients out and stuff. And it's just like, oh my God, like I am in a fucking Shirley Jackson novel.
This is it. This is real.
That was not my intent by moving into the suburbs. Oh man.
For me, with neighbors, my thought has always been, I don't want to, like, we're friendly with our neighbors. We like them, but it's like, hey, good morning and stuff. And I'm happy with that too. Cause my impression is that like, I don't want to be friends with someone just because they're close proximity. And if anything, that would almost make me nervous. Like we had friends that were our neighbors before and it worked out great and we're still friends. But I don't know, just the idea of like making a friend in the neighborhood who wants
might
to
just show
keep
up at your
seeing
door
you
because
and
they
is
walked
like,
over.
Yeah, like, hey, we can just hang out and be like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah, I've seen those videos where like the fence someone built their fence to like come down and become a bar. So like on both sides they can sit and hang out. And like we joked because our next door neighbors sold their house recently, and we were joking with some of our friends like, hey, you could live next door and we can just like build a thing to connect each house. And it was just like, oh, that sounds so cute. But I'm also like, no, we are introverts. We like our privacy.
Yeah, bar's closed.
Yeah. We need a little heads up if you're going to show up.
Before we move on real quick, to leap back just a little bit, I was talking about how we meet Harriet and her mom and how they're like burning her journal because her mom is just like, what the hell, you dirty,
her mom's
dirty
the
girl.
Worst in the neighborhood.
Yeah, she's just very imposing and judgmental. And then this scene kind of sets that relationship contrasted to Mr. Merriam, who is very much just a leave me in peace kind of guy. So Harriet went upstairs away from her mother's sorry voice. Her desk was unlocked. Instead of eating dinner, she and her mother had stood religiously by the furnace and put Harriet's diaries and letters and notebooks into the fire one by one, while solid Harry Merriam sat eating lamb chops and boiled potatoes upstairs alone. I don't know what it's all about, he said to Harriet and his wife when they came upstairs. Seems like a man ought to be able to come home after working all day and not hear people crying all the time. Seems like a man has a right to have a quiet home.
Dear God.
I don't see what's wrong with that.
What, wanting that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Like, I came home from work. If you could all just be pleasant and quiet, please.
Right?
I just
keep that crying for when I'm at work, ladies. I'm a man. I don't need to hear that.
I'm the more likely one to cry if there's an emotional movie on.
Yeah, that's true. I think we balance out pretty well with our roles in this house, right?
Yeah.
It's not a patriarchy. If anything, it's a matriarchy. Another really good quote about men in this, I think, is actually, it's probably one of the more famous quotes from this book. It kind of encapsulates a lot of the patriarchy and such. It's pretty short, though. No man owns a house because he really wants a house, any more than he marries because he favors monogamy. But all of these men were married, and most of them owned houses. So it just shows like, they're doing this because they're supposed to. And, you know, they have a wife because it's part of the plan, the great American dream, you know, have your wife clean your house and make you an apple pie. And
sounds awesome.
It's just so not true, though, as this book very clearly states. But isn't that
how it went with every family? Wasn't it perfect and peaceful and loving? Yeah, and the commercials and the propaganda. Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Right, and then people today look at the commercials from back then, they're like, that's how it was. It was perfect.
Wow,
what have we
life
done?
was so much more simple back then when women had to do laundry on washboards, you know? Like,
oh, man.
My mom said when she grew up, they didn't have they got a dishwasher once her and her sister moved out. They're like, we don't need a dishwasher. We have the kids to do it. But like, you know, like imagine we hate our dishwasher because it's constantly full of clean dishes. But imagine how much worse it would be if we didn't even have that. I mean, a lot of people don't still. That's not big of a deal, but that's just,
I think just an example of like, we did not have nearly as many conveniences in 1948.
Yeah. No, we didn't have Roombas.
Were there still ice boxes or were fridges starting to come around?
I think both.
Okay, early adopters had fridges.
I'm thinking about it, and this would be the early mid 50s, so they probably in some cases in some areas still had ice drop-offs and milk drop-offs and such, but you know they had refrigerators at this point. In
your Shirley Jackson biography, did it mention anything about like how other women would react to her? Like, was anyone like, "What are you doing, working and writing?" Or was she just like at home and so it didn't really come up?
Not so much in that sense. So it did come up a bit, but the main comment that was repeated was her lack of a clean house. It was always just kind of chaotic. I mean, I have one kid and I feel that. I don't have four. There's no like, oh, she was an awful mother, you know. It's just like one of the things that it said in the biography, someone mentioned that, you know, her house wasn't the cleanest, but she'd rather be sitting on the floor reading a book with her kid instead of cleaning up after her kid. She was viewed when they were living in Bremerton, Vermont. Her husband was a professor, and she was viewed as like the staff wife. So she was still considered a housewife. I'm just getting to the point now where her career is really picking up. She's just publishing The Savages right now, which is a funny, not gothic book about child rearing, semi-autobiographical. So her career is like really just starting to pick up now. So it might change once she's actually known as a famous author, as opposed to a wife who writes essays. But no, not really.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm guessing she was probably home writing and like doing the house stuff. It's not like she was going out and interact. It didn't seem like she was very social, is what I'm trying to say. So
they would throw parties, and actually, I just read
probably
this
other
part
writers
this morning.
and publisher type people
Yes,
too, who would be more like
open
cool
to
with
it,
that.
and yeah. But she would pull. She would just leave in the middle of a party and go in her office and start writing, and then finish whatever she was writing, come out, and if the party was still going, she'd come out and like rejoin
there
the
are
party.
times I would love to do that, just like I'm gonna go recharge.
Yeah, and so she would do that, and it was just like whatever.
Cool, I like
She's
her.
just doing her thing.
And let's get back to the book and the characters. So we set up the scene with the neighborhood and what suburban culture was like at this period of time.
So some of the things that have come up in this book that we've talked about are the wall breaking the barrier between the insulated neighborhood and the outside world, and also how people are treating their children in this. But I find that the wall can also represent the facade in and outside of a house. So, they give off this impression of being good people and such, but then you see like their darker sides, their shitty personalities, and how husbands and wives don't like each other, and how the children are miserable or little shits or whatever it is,
I think one of my favorite scenes, I don't have the quote, and I don't think I necessarily need it, but there's a character who's moving out. That's not Harriet, is it?
No, it's Helen and her little sister Mildred.
That's right. They're moving out, and then there's another.
They were renting a house too.
Yeah, they're renting a house there, and they're moving out, and then another character comes and like watches as their furniture and stuff is being taken out of the house.
That's Harriet.
Oh, okay. So Harriet's watching, and it's really interesting because I guess for a long time, Harriet had been intimidated by Helen because she has this whole thought process that's really fascinating where she's like, oh, look at all this shoddy furniture coming out. Like, look at that shoddy mirror and the shoddy chairs, and that table's kind of crummy. Like, I let this girl who is poor and has like bad material wealth intimidate me? Like, this is just like some poor kid.
Yeah. It also shows the roots of bullying. Usually bullies are bullied at home by their parents or making up for something. And maybe Helen was making up for the situation her family was in. Her father also had left. So it was just her sister, and her mom. It is an interesting thing. Like, it always seems to come back to how Harriet feels about things.
And they also have, maybe my favorite characters are the Macks. Mr. and Mrs. Mack, or maybe there's just a
it's
Mrs.
just
Mack.
Mrs. Mack, the old witch in an apple orchard.
Yeah, it's like an overgrown yard, and it's like just an old shabby house that the other neighbors are kind of embarrassed of because they want to be more upper class than lower middle class or whatever.
But they put up with her. It's hidden in the trees.
Yeah. They're like, it's fine because there's like basically trees blocking the view, so we accept it.
But she like yells at the kids, like, get off my lawn, kind of thing. She's a hoot, but she's also not invited to things. There are definitely exclusions. One really poignant scene is when, who was it? The old guy with the Shakespeare thing.
Oh, that part was great. I mean, sad, but
was
funny.
it Mr. Donald? One of the older gentlemen in the neighborhood is sitting around talking about how like the kids should be doing something in summer, not just running around wild. So he comes up with this idea that he's going to put on a Shakespearean play, and he's all excited and talking about who's going to do what role. And then they ask, oh, well, what about Marilyn? And he's like, oh, well, I don't want to offend her. She might be offended with the Merchant of Venice because there's one of those. So we'll put her on a special list and we won't invite her because we don't want to offend her. Nice. The whole idea we're like, oh, there, right?
Well, it's something you still see today, right? I think from his point of view, he's like, oh, wait, there's a Jewish character in The Merchant of Venice who is treated poorly and represented, as an imperfect character. And
a pound of flesh.
And because of that, we don't want this person who's actually Jewish in our neighborhood to be offended. So instead of like having a conversation, talking about it, doing a different play, whatever, just accepting that, there's a character that has issues with it, all that kind of stuff. Instead of doing that, they're just like, so what we'll do is exclude that person so that we don't offend them.
But it's also, I don't know, I can't say one way or the other, but it's also a way to exclude someone and still feel okay with yourself.
Well, you feel like you did it for a good reason. We're excluding her because we don't want her to be offended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's them who's going to be offended. I think she would have been more offended being left out. And she was 14? She probably hasn't even read The Merchant of Venice when, it's like Shakespeare. Half the people who read him can't even understand. So I don't know, whatever. So she's excluded from that. They have a backyard party at the end of the book. Mrs. Mack, this is what made me think of it, is excluded from that. Also, the entire Perlman family, and the Perlmans are the Jewish family. And then I believe also the Tyrrells, who are the new family who move in when Helen moves out. And they have a daughter. The younger daughter has some kind of mental issue where she gets money and she just runs off. She's not.
Yeah, there's some really great scene with her.
She's got, it's not really explained what she has, so I'm stumbling, but she has something going on. And instead of being helpful, the neighborhood ostracizes her family because of it.
Jackson doesn't describe whatever's going on with her is really well done, because I imagine the other characters in the neighborhood are probably just like, this girl's weird and funny. Yeah. It wasn't it feels like today we have much bigger and more nuanced conversation about different mental illnesses or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
But back then they're probably just like, who's this funny girl and what's up with her brain?
So they're excluded from things, but also the older girls take advantage. Her name's Beverly. Her thing is whenever she gets money, she takes the money and wants to go buy candy. She's like, oh, well, I'm going to go buy candy. And so her older sister, Frederica, is constantly like, oh, have you seen my sister, my sister? And at one point, two of the older girls are coming back into town with Beverly, and their pockets are stuffed with candy, and they very clearly were like, oh yeah, we'll go to the candy store with you, and taking advantage of people, which is in and of itself awful. But it actually brings up one of my favorite scenes, which is when Miss Fielding is scandalized the first time that Frederica comes to her door, because she's doing her nightly routine where she's boiling her eggs and she's making her toast and she's making her tea for supper. And then someone knocks on the door and she loses it. She's like, what am I going to do? My tea's going to be too dark. My eggs are going to be overcooked or cold. My toast is going to be hard. And she's all upset going to the door. And then Frederica is like, have you seen my little sister? She's lost. And now this is supper time, right? So it's potentially dark or getting dark soon. Miss Fielding's like, I haven't. And she's just trying to think of a way to get this girl off her porch. She's like, go ask Mrs. Ransom Jones. Go across the street. She's like, oh, so you have seen her? No, just go away. And pretty much closes the door on this girl who's leaning on it, trying to get help.
My kind of woman. Don't mess with my meal. I'm about to eat.
But it's a lost child, for God's sakes. Your fucking eggs can go bad. This is the
there's too many children on this street anyway. What's one lost?
Jesus Christ. Yeah, well, that's clearly her perspective. So I just love that, that just you can see her like, oh God, pushing the door closed on this poor girl, and then getting back to her meal. Oh, and everything's fine. Her food's just okay. And then she's all upset and worried about it. It's like, oh my God, people.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like this is the book for about 170 pages. I don't know. Most of the book is like, here is a suburban neighborhood, and then here's little vignettes showing that these aren't perfect people.
But
and it's done really well.
It's not about them being not perfect.
It feels to me like it's got the poison.
The underhanded, stab you in the back, stab you under the table, and like jab it in a couple times.
The effect of it is like, look at this perfect suburb. Wait, it's not perfect.
It's a facade.
And it's like, okay,
yeah,
I know that. This is like in 2025, it feels pretty quaint.
But it's also 2025. Like these True. People were living. I mean, she was living in this world where this was the expectation was that you were the facade, and to break that in that society is clearly different than it is today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, as a 2025 reader, it doesn't quite hold up for me because it's approaching things that just seem quaint from today's point of view, but are still important and still apply. I think too, just to like in storytelling, right? Because this is very much like, hey, this idea of the perfect little American suburb is not true. These people are actually rotten to the core, right? But now storytelling is like completely flipped, where it's like, we want to hear stories about terrible people because we know everyone's terrible. If anything,
like I was a teenage slasher is the point of view of the slasher.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if anything, maybe a revolutionary book now would be like writing about a neighborhood of people who just actually do really get along well.
And they're really nice to each other, and it's like super diverse, and like everyone comes out for like, all the different ethnic holidays and stuff.
Whenever there's an issue, they talk to each other with calm heads. They're like, what is this?
Oh man.
But anyway, let's continue. I guess my point is saying is we're kind of going through, like, the book shows all these little ways that the different neighbors jostle for position around each other.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's basically the plot of the book. And it's like, hey, look at this naughty neighborhood.
Yeah, I think she's also pointing out this to people like, hey, you are probably at least one of these families or parts of each of these families. So, take a look at yourself as well.
And you could almost see, like, say the suburb is the first line of horror in some way. I don't know if the first line's a good metaphor, but what I'm trying to say is, think about how the Perlmans, the Jewish family, are ostracized, right? Like, don't play with that girl. Stick with people by us. Like, it's mean, but in a suburban setting, it's almost, I don't know, it's played as like just like, stay over here. This is not so bad. Like, yeah, that's kind of mean, but that's fine. But that's the repercussions of that lead to the Holocaust. They can, right? The whole idea of like, if in the home, in like the basic middle class, suburban, idealistic household, you have someone saying, don't go play with that girl over there because she's from a different group. That's the mindset that
that's the basis
can lead
of racism.
To absolute horrors, right?
Yeah.
So this is where Jackson excels, is like these small, tiny little like interactions can have huge repercussions. And I think that's her point too. Like, if it's rotten in the suburb, as part of the reason it's rotten on the battlefield.
But the whole basis of the suburb is rotten. It's keeping the quote unquote others out. It was for wealthy white people to get away from the minorities in the city who came to work and do all, everything was in the city. You either worked on a farm or you moved to the city because that's where jobs were. So as soon as the ability to leave was presented to white people, I mean, black people were literally not able to buy homes in lots of suburbs for a very long time, for this very reason, to keep them out, to keep it white, to keep it clean and nice. And Jackson is showing us that is bullshit, even when it is just a bunch of white people, with the one Jewish family.
Good
but
real
it's
life.
Still a hierarchy of, they rent, and that old lady's crazy, and it's everywhere. Even if you think you're in a quote unquote safe space from that, it's still there.
An interesting real life parallel to this is the Interstate 20 in Atlanta was a highway that was deliberately created to divide white and black neighborhoods as a physical barrier. And I mean, that's just one example I can think of, because we had someone in Atlanta tell us about that history and how it had made it a lot harder for the black communities to commute or get the advantages from the amenities in white neighborhoods, right? And I'm sure there's examples of that
city.
All over the place. But
every city we've lived in, I can tell you where the historic black areas were. And Hunters Point in San Francisco has now been gentrified. Basically, Oakland, the entire Oakland has been gentrified. But that's because now people are moving out of the suburbs back into the cities. There's a book that I've been meaning to read. It's been on my TBR, like everything else, for a very long time. But it's called The Color of Law. The subheader is The Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And the cover, you might recognize it if you've seen it. It's parceled out neighborhood thing. And the whole point of this book was talking about how the government created. I mean, we still see that with creating voting blocks. I mean, you see some of these absolutely insane counties just to make sure that the vote goes the way that the people in power want it to. And nothing's changed. But I feel like we're getting a little
let's get back
sidetracked.
Well, I mean, we're getting a little sidetracked, but it all comes down to what is the Mrs. Miriam's judgmental smile? What are the repercussions of that, right? And the repercussions of that are racism and
just
othering
not giving a shit.
And not giving a shit and allowing things to happen, right?
Which brings up another question for me. Who killed Carolyn?
Spoiler alert. So this girl, Carolyn.
You said we already did that.
Well, yeah, but here it is.
Here it is,
So
folks.
some little girl dies. I didn't really care because there's 20 characters in this book. So I was like, one of them's dead. I guess that's one less person I have to remember.
But there is okay. So she's 3 years old and she's like the perfect child. She goes with her mom to the sewing meetings and sits prim and proper. She's always has the perfect outfit.
She's also the perfect child because she's too young to have a personality, right?
Yes, and she's treated like a doll more than a child. But this little 3-year-old disappears during the barbecue, and then after a neighborhood search, which is its own chaotic mess where people are kind of helping, I guess, sort of, not really. But
Mr. Roberts is getting drunk.
Mr. Roberts is already really drunk. And one of the kids overhear him while he's on the sidewalk saying, well, I'd help, but drunk, Mrs. Miriam, who we've already established is the worst in the neighborhood, is like, oh, it was Todd. And Pat's like, yeah, another one of the moms is like, well, Pat said it might have been an accident. And she says, even if it was an accident, there were other things about it that were not accidental. So she's implying even if Carolyn's death was an accident, Todd was weird enough that he did other things. So that just makes him guilty by association. So creepy. And Mrs. Roberts is more concerned about the fact that her husband was drunk and she's yelling at him for flirting. And they're more concerned about their own issues than this fucking 3-year-old girl who just died. And that, I think, is what really killed Carolyn.
Yeah. Also, it's too big of a cast, so they're like, whatever.
You were stuck on that.
You know what it is?
It wasn't that bad.
No, you know what it is? It's a reflection on me. A book with a big cast makes me feel dumb because I don't know who anybody is.
I think it's kind of like Stephen Graham Jones, where you have to let it just happen.
That's not how I read it. I did just let it happen, but then I didn't know who anyone was.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of my point with the who killed Carolyn. It doesn't really matter. A lot of those names don't even come up. It really does focus in more on
it's not really
5 to 10 people, but it's still a lot. Yeah,
I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating when I say I don't know who anyone is. There's definitely characters that you spend more time with, and there are characters that come through more strongly.
And she's not the best at individualizing each of these characters.
Yeah, it feels like she's looking more at the neighborhood as a character for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did say that a lot. There are too many people.
My biggest problem that I ran into is so much of it was like characters in conversation. There were a lot of paragraphs where she would say 4 or 5 people's names in the like Mrs. Ramsey Jones said.
That's what fetching is.
Yeah, but it's like
you struggle with that in
tags.
person too. When there's like 4 people in a conversation, you just sit there and you're like, no, I'm not I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
I don't like group conversations.
Yeah, so that's just your personality trait. So okay, now I know. No kvetching, no book kvetching.
A little bit of kvetching is okay, but here's what I struggled with too is like, and these were partly my own expectations, but they met the scary Chinaman, right? And because this was written in 1948, my thought was like, oh, that's going to lead to like, they're going to go in there and find like, I don't know, like a monkey paw or like, some kind of Orientalism mystique thing. I don't know. Or when they had like, you guys are all writing dirty letters to each other. I was like, oh, that's going to lead to something happening, and nothing happens. It's just like, no, the kids are naughty. Can you believe these kids are naughty? And like, it doesn't go anywhere. And that's not the point of the story. The point is to show like these little like pockets of, of corruption within the supposedly good suburban neighborhood. But I just felt like there are lots of threads that were created and then they just like were dropped for the next.
Yeah.
It was almost like a picaresque novel within a neighborhood.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, look at that. I sound like a critic or like an academic.
Hey, Harold Bloom didn't like this book.
I bet he wouldn't because, Yeah, I bet.
He seems like... She's also a woman, so she's not allowed in the Western canon.
Harold Bloom, I've read some of his criticism and it's kind of funny, but he also seems like the kind of guy who would criticize this book.
Jackson definitely continues with her writing to focus on like the perspective of women and their roles in the family and in the world and what society does to them. That basically is, we have always lived in the castle. I think though, with any writer, this is her first novel. So
it reads like a first novel, which is super interesting. And it's like a great segue to the lottery. I feel like this...
It was a great build-up for it.
You could almost read this as a 200-page prologue to the lottery or something because it fits very well.
You want to know something very interesting, though? There were basically no copy edits to this book.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember running across any obvious issues or anything.
You're reading a very late iteration. It's been... republished multiple times since then, but just the original, there was not a lot to do. It was done basically.
She's a clean writer.
Cool. And it's very well written. I think she just was finding her voice because she also, a lot of her success started to come when she was writing funny stuff, and she has comics that she would draw of her family life. She was a spunky woman. And it definitely shows in this book. It's just, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I'm going to read one more quote just because I didn't get to the second one. Can I just do that?
Sure.
Because it's so funny.
I can do quotes for days.
So there's this character, George. Don't know who he is. Just some kid. He's like maybe in this scene and then never shows up again. I don't really know. But he's talking about like, what would you do with a truck or if you had a tractor? So this kid says, and he's hanging out, I think he's outside with his sister or something, but definitely his grandfather is sitting out there with them, kind of like being all sleepy in his chair. So George says, you know what I'd do? He insisted, turning to look at his grandfather. I'd run it right into old Mrs. Miriam's house, and I'd run it right over her. Run over Mrs. Miriam, and I'd run over Mr. Miriam. This became very long because George was trying to straighten a skate wheel. Then his voice quickened again, and I'd run over old Harriet, and I'd run over old Mrs. Miriam. If I had a truck, that's what I'd do. The sun made the old grandfather sleepy, and he half closed his eyes. He found it difficult to understand much of what his grandchildren said. They spoke so quickly and with such strange words, and the tongue itself was still alien to an old man. When George looked up at him, the grandfather smiled and nodded, exactly as he had smiled and nodded at the immigration officials 40 years before. You grow up, he said sleepily. When I grow up, George went on, I'm going to have a tractor. Tractor, the grandfather said. I'll run into the whole world and kill him. So
I love that.
Love this kid saying this like horrible thing, and grandpa's like, all right, kid, I love you. I'm going to go back to sleep now. Basically, I am the grandfather.
Okay, so I have a quote to respond to your quote. This is Helen, who's talking to her little sister, Mildred. You just listen to me, she said in her normal voice. If you ever tell on me again, if you ever tell anything, I'll cut out your tongue and I'll slice off all your fingers and I'll cut a big hole in your stomach with a carving knife and I'll hit you with a hatchet.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Like, damn, girl.
It's very specific.
I know, right? And then another creepy part that we didn't touch on was when Todd goes into the Desmond house.
Oh, yeah. Talk about that. That was weird.
So at one point, Todd sees Mrs. Desmond leave the house with Carolyn. The house is empty, and he notices that the back door is open. So he goes in, and this house is immaculately clean. Like, this is the magazine picturesque 1950s perfect house where everything is sparkling, right? And he goes into Mrs. Desmond's room and he puts some of her perfume on his hand, and he goes and sits and shoves himself in the back of her closet under her clothes and stuff, and smells her clothes and smells the perfume on his hand, shoves his face in one of her articles of clothing and just yells profanities, all the bad words that he has ever been told, and then goes outside and like falls asleep on the grass. It's really weird. Yeah, he definitely comes across as a bit of a creep. And then it's like, okay, it makes you wonder, were the kids sensing that? And that's why he's ostracized, because he was different in a not necessarily good way? Or is this a cause of that? Is this just something that a little boy would do when
it's
they have a chance?
I was at my research library, read it, and... I was like, so who killed Carolyn? Because I know you said it doesn't matter, but
it's my theory.
But the theory that I came up in my deep research, the book clearly, like, once you kind of leads you to think that it was Todd, or at least Todd ends up taking the brunt of it. Heavily implied, right? But there's also a scene where Mrs. Roberts, who is one mean old lady, is talking to Harriet, one of the main characters of the children, and she's like, you are fat and ugly, and you are always going to be fat and ugly, and suck it, basically.
And this is at the barbecue where Carolyn goes missing. So this is like directly before.
Yeah. So one of the theories was that it could have actually been Harriet, because she's been ostracized throughout her life, and then has an adult at this like major moment in the book just
another adult
tell her like, you're worthless, and you're always going to be worthless, and you're ugly. And
that's all her mom does to her. Like the theory is then that she snapped, because
and Carolyn's perfect. Someone's going to reach out and they'll be like, actually, it's clearly stated that Harriet's there while Carolyn dies. I don't know if that's true, but that's what Reddit told me.
Doesn't she watch from the window? Or I don't know. I
forget where she is.
You didn't mention that until after I had.
That's towards the end of the book. It's before Carolyn dies, but it's the scene, where Mrs. Roberts
I'd have to go back and read it.
So nasty to this young girl.
But and she's not the only one, and her mom tells her she cannot be friends with Marilyn, who's her only friend. And there's one scene too where Marilyn and Harriet go into the woods and write notes. And they promise they're not going to read them until they're adults. And one of them's nice, I'm going to grow up and be a writer, and no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm not going to get married, and my life's going to be great. I'm going to have lots of parties. And then the other one's I'm going to be a famous actress and make people do what I tell them. But you don't know whose is whose. But I would think that Harriet would be the aggressive one. I don't know. But yeah. So again,
sure.
It gives you so much to think about.
But it's very much, that's just one of those classic childhood activities, like burying secret notes under the ground. I actually had I was poo buddies with somebody in 4th grade. I think we just wrote down the word poo on a piece of paper and buried it in at our school.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, it probably has decomposed.
Like poo.
Like poo. Paper does not last that long.
Yeah. So there you go. Just like these kids in the neighborhood.
Wow. Oh, God.
All right. Should we talk about what we thought of the book? I mean, is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, we covered the major things. I think, we can quote stuff and talk about it.
We didn't talk about what happens at the very end with
that's
Todd,
true.
But I think we can keep that there.
We'll leave one thing not spoiled for you if you decide to read this.
So here's a question. Was this a horror book or was it even weird fiction? What is it doing on this podcast?
This is American Gothic, which technically falls under the horror category. And funny enough, this is categorized as horror on Goodreads
now, and
Storygraph. And
does
all that.
American Gothic just mean that Shirley Jackson wrote it?
Yes, and that's the genre. It's the style. It's like the horrors of life in America. Well, okay, hold on, but there are actual horrors in the life of America, but like the undertones of. I don't know if I can specifically say like white society. Hold on. Let's look up the actual definition. So the American Gothic fiction is a subgenre of Gothic fiction. This is all according to Wikipedia. Elements specific to American Gothic include rationality versus the irrational, Puritanism, guilt, the uncanny, which originates from the German das Unheimliche, abhumans, ghosts, and monsters.
Abhumans?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like humans with
abhumans is a term to distinguish a separation from normal human existence. It's different from inhuman, which typically connotes an ethical or moral separation from others.
Interesting. So
this is referring to the Gothic body, basically. A vestige for something to become awful. So, So, I know you did it in weird fiction and I'm doing it with Gothic, but I
mean, like, this is one of those horror, and like, this is a type of horror, right? Where it's like a slow burn where everything is kind of normal until like the very end. It's one of those horror stories where then like a tragedy occurs, right? Where... And so I think I was just a little bit like, okay, I get the neighborhood thing.
It's subjective.
Yeah.
She is one of the predominant American Gothic writers. Another subgenre, which you probably would know better, is Southern Gothic. Southern American Gothic.
Yeah, that's all William Faulkner.
Yeah, and Flannery
I'm sure
O'Connor.
others.
Flannery
I'm very
O'Connor,
ignorant. Yeah. Oh, Flannery O'Connor, of course.
It fits kind of in that Americanism. I wanted to do this one because I hadn't read it in a while, and it's her debut novel. I thought that would be fun to revisit, like her beginnings. As you said, I'm too scared to do We've Always Lived in the Castle yet. I kind of want to stew on it more. I want to reread it at least a couple more times.
Level up a little more with your podcasting skills.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that, we're actually good at this by the time we do that. I know. I knew when I picked this up again, I was like, oh, right, this isn't horror. So it's kind of funny. It fits.
I'm just glad that it's funny that the tables have been turned and now I'm great. Like, hey, where's the blood?
There is blood. It's all over Carolyn's dress.
Yeah, all over.
And
they
her
describe
head.
it quite a bit of detail too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's, and that's part of it too. Horror is subjective. Some people find different things horrific, and that's why I think it's hard to suggest horror to people, because like I find this book incredibly horrific because I'm also a pessimist, and I believe that generally people are actually like this on a normal basis, and people scare me. So like getting an insight into what you would want to consider a safe space, which would be, your home or your neighborhood, to have that taken away in like subtle ways like this. I think everything Shirley Jackson does is good. So
you liked it?
I liked it. Yes, it's not my favorite. Obviously, we all know what my favorite Shirley Jackson novel is, but I did really enjoy it. I do like this book.
I guess since you started that off, then I'll say I did enjoy it. I know I've been talking a little bit of crap.
D-I-D. Right?
I did enjoy it.
Okay.
I'm glad
I thought you
read
said
it.
didn't. That's why.
It was a little... I had to push through it a little bit because like I said, it was kind of a big cast and there was a lot of like kvetching in the kitchen. And as a man, I just don't care. That's so toxic of me to say.
I know. See?
But I don't care. I hate kvetching. Kvetching.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. See, you're a man. You don't care. This is the horror of it.
Don't kvetch at me. Oh my God. Leave me in peace, please. I think the men had it right here. Like, get drunk and then like quietly sit in your chair and ignore the insanity going around you.
Wow.
They really had
Our true colors are shining today, folks.
But I mean, like, Jackson's writing is incredible. Her witticism and like her subtle satire and not so subtle satire is great. It's very much an enjoyable read. My biggest complaint is like, okay, you're seriously going to have this huge ass cast, multiple people talking to each other and multiple scenes. And one of the characters' names and a main character is Mrs. Ramsey Jones. I had to read the word Mrs.
Ransom Jones.
It was Ramsey Jones, wasn't it?
Ransom.
Okay. So I had to read Mrs. Ransom Jones like 400 times. And it was just like, oh my God.
How dare you hyphenate your name?
Like, come on,
That's a whole other point of contention here,
woman,
babe.
if you could shorten your name to Mrs. J and make it a lot easier for the men around here.
Well, she changed her name to fit his, so technically it's his fault.
Well, shit. Isn't that how it usually happens?
She didn't hyphenate her name. She took his hyphenated name, so there you go.
All I'm saying is I've got a small brain that can only hold 4 or 5 characters at a time. But no, I enjoyed it. It was great. Go read it.
It sounds like if this is going to be your only Shirley Jackson book or your first Shirley Jackson book,
read it then.
Don't start here.
This is a book
if
that you want to read
her and you like her writing and you haven't read it yet, then go and read it.
Or if you like the idea of like nasty side street America. With a lot of kvetching.
At least that's how I was raised to say it. In my small town neighborhood.
No. What are you reading? Besides this?
Well, I already mentioned I'm reading her biography by Ruth Franklin, Shirley Jackson, A Rather Haunted Life. I will be done with that probably tomorrow because, of course, I couldn't finish it in time. I'm about to pick up a book called Reprieve by James Han Mattson, which I am reading for the summer book club for the Oregon Horror Writers Association. We're going to meet for that at the end of June. So we'll see if I can get through. It's like a 400-page book. I'm like, oh my God, I have nothing else to do. So that's it sounds interesting. It's about a killing in a haunted escape room, but like some of the reviews, it has like mixed reviews, and some people are like, this was not like a high action book, and they complained about it. And someone actually said their review, and they gave it a good review, that it's a quiet, thoughtful book. So I'm really curious. A killing in a haunted escape room that's quiet and thoughtful. We'll see.
Well, maybe they get stuck and like can't figure out the next step, and there's like 150 pages,
and they're just sitting there like doing math. Like, okay, how do we figure out this puzzle? Yeah, right. So that I haven't started yet, but I'm about to. I'm also outside of horror, seriously considering finally reading The Coming of the Third Reich by Richard J. Evans, which is the first of a very large trilogy. It feels like a good time to
I read that,
revisit the rise of fascism. Can't imagine why, but that's just something I've been
that was a COVID read for me. I forgot.
Milling over.
I know that I have
The
read
Evans book?
Yeah, I read it during COVID.
Okay, I thought you read The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich. I
No,
thought you read the
I read the first
okay.
one, and it was terrifying. And it's only the first one. It's just them
Yeah.
coming up. And I'm like, that book kind of shook me, and I was like, not ready to go right into the second one.
Yeah, I've read a lot about Nazi Germany since my grandmother grew up in Nazi Germany, and I have studied the beginnings of it, and it is horrifying. But I feel like I need a refresher, so I might as well read a tome, especially because we're on to our last podcast book next. So I will have a little bit of breathing room to do that.
And our last book is going to be scary. It is horrific. It is terrifying. I hope. I don't know if it's terrifying, but I know it's going to be disturbing and bloody and gory. Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. I think I'm close to that.
I'm going to struggle. I can't do Spanish.
I'll figure out the correct pronunciation and share it with you.
Trills and stuff,
we'll
man.
practice.
My mouth can't handle that.
We'll have a vocal session.
Yeah, I apologize in advance for my butchering of her name because I know already I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. I feel like we need some serious horror since we keep dodging it. So anyway, yeah. So do you want to go into what you're reading, or do you want to talk about Tender's the Flesh first?
I'll do what I'm reading because it's pretty quick. It's actually one that I had brought up before. Please Kill Me, The Uncensored Oral History of Punk. And it's a really cool book that a friend gave me that has a bunch of interviews with like punks during the late 60s up through maybe the late 80s. I don't know if it gets into 90s or not. I had mentioned it before because I was kind of like dabbling in it, and I've actually like pushed through about 100 pages in the last couple of days. So
is it straight up interviews?
I think they just any material they could find where these people were talking about their lives. So whether it was interviews or journals or just videos people took while they were hanging out.
So it's not interviewing people now or pulling
no, I think
interviews.
I think it's a mix. I think some are
mix pieces. Okay. Yeah. And then do they like talk about, they must like generalize and summarize things in between. It's not just like quote, quote, quote.
No, it's basically like at first it's Velvet Underground and it's just, I don't know, a bunch of them like character's name. Here's what they're saying. There's no like editorializing. It's just them talking. Huh. But then it'll be like the Biggie Pop period or whatever. And like these people were just nuts. So having a lot of fun with that.
Oh, that's cool. I like that structure. It sounds fun. Yeah,
it's really cool. And my hope is to push. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's like, I don't know, maybe 600 or so pages. I mean, I will eventually read the whole thing, but I think I'm going to try to do another 100, 200 pages and then got to read Tender is the Flesh, our next book. Really excited about that.
Me too.
And then after that,
this book has been on my list forever.
And I'm excited because our really good friend who comes and visits us every winter also loves horror, and he's a disgusting person. And
we love you, John.
And he was even like, "Ooh, Tender is the Flesh is like messed up." So that's high praise.
What a perfect, yeah, right, exactly. What a perfect book to end on. We got you pushing the boundary of not horror, and me pushing the boundary of not horror, and then now let's get into it.
Yeah. And then, like we mentioned before, we're going to take a break after that. We'll probably still come up with some, at least a couple of summer episodes. I think it could be fun to have one where we like talk about maybe what our favorite book was of this first season.
Yeah, with a little room to think about it.
Yeah, I'll actually be able to have hopefully more substantial answer to what I'm reading because we'll actually have a little bit of time to do some of our own reading, which will be cool. Other than that, we'll see you for our last episode, episode 13, Tender is the Flesh. Close out the season. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you.
Now you can go vacuum my house. Well, if you've made it this far, then we didn't scare you off. Thanks for listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction.
Please rate our podcast, and if you like, follow us on Instagram at Dusk to Dawn Podcast, which is also our Gmail address. Tell us what you liked or didn't like about the show, and let us know if you have any book suggestions. See you next time. Bye.